Good morning, everyone. My name is Victor Nyongesa, Programs Manager at Youth Agenda. Just want to take this opportunity to welcome you all to this discussion. Looking at on your screen, you can all see the program for the day. And looking also at the numbers of participants in this Zoom, I think it will be good just for us to start with introductions. Others who will join, I think, we'll just request them to share their details on the chat site, chat option, where we'll get their details. We are going to have introductions from the 10 members who are already in. Then thereafter, I will invite the CEO to give his opening remarks. So for the introduction, it's going to be random. You just say your name and the institution you work in. Yeah, basically that. So it's going to be just on a random basis. Kindly proceed. Hello.
Hello, Victor. I can hear you.
Let's introduce ourselves kindly.
Right. I'm Peris Mwangi from Humanity and Inclusion.
Okay, thank you, Peris.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Grace Gitau from ActionAid.
Hi everyone, my name is Nuru Hadija and I'm from Change Focused Organization.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, good morning. My name is Jael Diana. I'm from Kenyatta University.
Thank you, Jael.
Hello everyone.
Hear you? Alfred,
Hello
please.
everyone. I'm Alfred Magera from the Job Internship Program in Mombasa.
Thank you, Alfred.
I'm saying, I'm Alfred. I'm Alfred from the Hijabi Mentorship Program in Mombasa.
Welcome, Alfred.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Mercy Nduku, Director of Youth Agenda Board.
Welcome, Mercy.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have Simon.
Yes, good morning.
Kindly introduce yourself.
Good morning. I'm Simon Mwangi from Humanity and Inclusion, formerly Handicap International.
Thank you, everyone, for the introductions. At this point, I think I'll invite my senior, Kelvin Kia, to give an opening remarks. And thereafter, I think we'll dive into the programs direct, just to look at the first session of the documentary that will inform now our discussions. We are going to have a moderator on board who is going to moderate the session. She will have the opportunity to introduce the first panelist after the documentary. So welcome all, and Kevin, kindly proceed.
Well, thank you very much, Victor, for holding in and starting the session. I want to say good morning to everyone. My name is Kelvin Kerr. I'm the CEO for Youth Agenda. It's a pleasure to have Masinduku, my board director and the founder member of the Youth Agenda, here with us. I'm grateful to have players from HI. Of course, I'm looking forward to also have participants probably in the video from Action Aid, as well as the campus network that is working with our officer on gender. Youth Agenda is a youth serving organization that is mandated to advocate for the rights of young people into the country and probably beyond. And in our programs, we've also established a program on gender development and advocacy, where we have a gender and peace security officer, who is Maryanne, who has been working closely with a number of us to ensure that we have this day a success. In the past days, we have been putting public messages of 16 days of activism against sexual gender-based violence, and you have been seeing them. And we are going to finalize today by having the Say Your Truth documentary, which is actually a compilation of the efforts that Youth Agenda has been doing and has been covering, and looking forward to also continue to do in this space of gender and advocating for the rights of both genders, male and female, into accessing rights and opportunities as enshrined in our constitution and the legal laws of the land, as well as the world. We appreciate your participation. We appreciate your support. We appreciate your commitment to this cause. And as we go forward, we hope that this is not just the beginning, it's not just the end, but the beginning of a better future of partnership together to ensure that the issues and the matters that are affecting our people, issues around gender-based violence will be addressed forthrightly, and even go ahead to advocate for the 2000 gender rule being implemented in the country. I want to thank everyone who has come on board today, and I want to ask us that we fully participate in this process and launch our documentary, share it widely so that it can reach the maximum or the fullest potential within our reach. I wish to say that this particular activity is officially opened and look forward to a successful deliberations. Thank you so much. Thank you, Victor. Over to you, Victor or Maryanne.
Okay. Thank you, Bwana Kelvin. Looking at the program, I'm going to officially project the first bit of the documentary. And this bit is going to inform the next session. And also immediately after the documentary, we are going to have a moderator who will take over to introduce the panelists and moderate the session. So allow me to project.
Victor, we can't hear anything. I think you're on mute or something.
Sorry, Victor, there seems to be a problem. The video is not audible.
Apologies for that. Allow me to share again to restart it.
To campaign, which is a pan-African movement advocating against sexual harassment in higher education from staff to students. The 16 days of activism is a very important feat and source of mastermind. It reminds me of some of the things that women experience. You find that a lot of psychological torture, sexual violence, physical violence, and in most times you see many people suffering in silence. This is the platform I want to bring during these 16 days of gender activism. Because you may be a person carrying to speak out. It may give somebody courage to speak out. Because in most cases, when you're tackling things related to violence, it's a very sensitive matter, and most of the time people feel alone, and people want to feel that we have a community behind them. So we have to stand up, help each other, and stand in support, speak out about this matter, because we give somebody courage and confidence who is suffering and so to speak out. And also a situation that we have been able to do.
Campus Me Too is a Pan-African student-led movement, as I had earlier on said, against sexual harassment in higher learning institutions from staff to other students. We realize that sexual harassment is deeply ingrained in our institutions of higher learning, and most of these students in our higher learning institutions are suffering in silence, and no one is there to protect them, to speak out on for them. So we saw this as a conversation to talk about, because we find that a lot of students are being pressured to exchange sexual acts in favor of good grades, and we see that it gives students a voice to speak about some of these issues that are facing them, more so on sexual harassment. So we launched this campaign last year in November, specifically on the 19th of November at the University of Nairobi, whereby more than 500 students were gathered in University of Nairobi to launch this campaign and to say that they're saying no to sexual harassment in higher learning institutions. They're giving a voice to those students who feel they don't have a voice, to those students who want to give to give all in their careers, and yet they cannot because they are faced by this vice on sexual harassment in these institutions. To give also courage to those students who feel that I cannot graduate because I'm being pressured to give in for these sexual acts. So that was the launch of our campaign. Also, still in the same month, we collected signatures for preparation of the 5 student demands that they came up with. And the first student demand that the students came up with to support also back this campaign was to facilitate all newly enrolled students to watch an educational resource on sexual harassment. The second one was to conduct an yearly training for all staff members in the university so that they can have also an understanding of what really sexual harassment is. The third one is to appoint a gender officer who will be involved in matters of responding and recognizing sexual harassment complaints from students. The fourth one is basically on establishing an investigation committee whereby if students have experienced unfair or missing marks, they're able to get help from this committee. And the fifth one basically is the implementation of all the 4 that I've talked about. So those ones are the 5 student demands that came up that they came up with last year. And in these 5 demands, the students collected more than 11,000 signatures in support of these 5 demands. So after that, we handed over these signatures or these petition papers that we had to the Ministry of Education last year. And from there on, we've been making strides to find out the status of the petition, of where it is at this moment, and also for the Ministry of Education to give a directive for all institutions of higher learning to implement these 5 student demands, because it is key that this conversation is talked about and we are open to talk about it, because if the students don't talk about it, then who else will? So it's our time to talk about this issue, to help our sisters, our brothers, sons and daughters who will one day join institution and not be aware of this thing on sexual harassment. But if we create awareness right now on this issue on sexual harassment, I feel and I believe that will help fight for those people who feel that they cannot fight for these issues at the moment. My call to action will be, this campaign has grown so much. And in this campaign, we have different stakeholders. We have the students, we have the parents, staff, both teaching and unteaching. We have different organizations, NGOs. We have government institutions. So there are different stakeholders who can help fight this issue on sexual harassment. And all these stakeholders, for example, in the Campus Me Too campaign, the students have developed a student toolkit to help in preventing or just helping other students to know how to prevent when it comes to cases on sexual harassment, to know how to collect evidence, and not just collecting evidence, but collecting evidence safely, to know where to report. And if they have something or they need to report to someone, you find that a high percentage, as based on our campaign last year, is they speak to their friends, or at times they don't speak to anybody. And also even based on our statistics last year, so according to our campaign, 49% of female students have experienced sexual harassment. 24% of male students have experienced sexual harassment from a university staff member. And out of this, we see that 66% of these people these students who are being sexually harassed experience it from either a professor or a lecturer. So that's why we feel that it is important we start discussing this issue and also calling out every stakeholder. And also for the students, we have our website, we have different social media pages on Campus Me Too. So you can follow us at Campus Me Too in Instagram, in Facebook, in Twitter, and we also have a website that has all those information to help these students and to protect them, just to get information, because I believe that information empower. And in most cases, we see that institutions of higher learning are not for perverts to thrive, but for students to experience their career growth. And also for the parents, we also have the parents' toolkit For the lecturers, we have lecturers toolkits, because sometimes you realize that some of these people want to help, but they do not know how to help the students. So all these toolkits are just necessary materials that everybody needs to read and to understand, because this will enable you to help the student talk about this issue and to feel safe, because this campaign is about creating safe spaces for everybody to speak out and not to feel victimized. And also for the different organizations to just stand in solidarity with these students, because there is power in numbers. Because if they're speaking alone and there is no one out here to help them, then it will be a very big gap. And also for the institutions to ensure that they're strengthening their policies, and also they're reviewing their policies, and they're creating channels for these students to report, because they may have these experiences on sexual harassment, but where are they going to report, and how can they report? And to the person they're reporting to, is this person a person who can be trusted by these students? So there are a lot of things that we need to factor in, and especially when we're dealing with matters on sexual harassment, because it is very important to understand that this is a sensitive matter, and also understand that even when these students come out and speak out, it's that they have courage. And also to understand never to blame the victim, because it's never the victim's fault, because most of the times the victims are victimized and made to feel as if it was their fault that these things happen. It is never the victim's fault, because I believe that we have power. As students in universities of higher learning, we have power to speak out. We have clarity with each other and ensure that these issues come to an end, and we help each other to become aware and just to feel safe when everybody comes to tell us in regard to sexual harassment. When I just think about this issue on gender-based violence, most of the times when I'm just seated with my friends, we laugh about it, but sometimes it's something that has scarred us in one point or the other. Every person have the right to be respected and live a life of dignity. Because if we do not respect another person's right, then it feels, for me, it's something that I do not ascribe to if a person's right is not respected. Because it's how you want to be treated that you also treat other people. There is power when you tell your story. Because most of the times when we are, I realize that when we are with other people, we experience a lot of courage, because you find that, oh, this happened to you too, oh, this happened to me as well. So you find that when you have that safe space of understanding that you did not go through this alone, because sometimes you end up blaming yourself, or you blame where you are born. Why was I born in this family? Because when probably you go to your friend's family, you see they have a very good relationship with their parents. But when you look back to where you came from, you start regretting, why was I born? So I just like to give hope to everybody who feels that they are alone, who feels that some of these issues I can never forgive, some of these issues I can never get over it. There is hope in speaking out. There is hope in sharing your story, because you're not alone in this journey, and there's also courage in knowing that you're not alone, and in knowing that you're helping another person speak out and also help to fight some of these issues that are being faced by both men and women, and more so especially when you, on higher statistics, as we all know, and even based on the statistics that we see in Kenya, women face a lot of this gender-based violence, and most of them actually do not talk about it because they have wounds, and they do not want to just come and tell their story, because they'll just, I have so many problems. I even don't want to speak about that issue on gender-based violence. I have my children. But if you're a woman out there, it's important also to speak out about this issue to a trusted person who you feel that will help you ease the wounds that you have. So there's power in numbers, there's power in people, there's power in speaking out and giving courage and just passing on the mic to those people who feel that they do not have a voice. Because we all have a voice and we are all loved, because in this country, I believe there are those people that care, that do genuinely care for these people who have experienced these things, because we have different helplines in the Red Cross, 1199, the National GBV hotline, we have 1195, and also ActionAid has an SMS platform, 21094. So there are a lot of platforms whereby if you're having all these issues that you can share and get help. So, and also you can also join the conversation during these 16 days of activism on Involve Youth KE and 16 Days of Activism. If you have a story, you can share it, because there's power, as I've said, in sharing a story. Give courage to that person who feels alone, because you never know, it will maybe a breakthrough to this person and make them feel loved and wanted.
Thank you. That was the first bit of the documentary. And at this point, I think I would like to welcome the moderator of the session, Maryanne, who is going to introduce the panelists for the first discussion. Karibu sana, Maryanne, to take over kindly.
Thank you, Victor. I hope you can all hear me.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we can.
Our first panelist today will be Jael, who is the face of the campus Me Too campaign. Jael is an activist who believes students need to have a safe space in learning, devoid of fear and intimidation by predators of sexual harassment. Jael has spoken out before about her experience as a student victim of sexual harassment in her institution, and uses every avenue possible to create awareness on this menace and find a solution to her fellow students. Jael Diana is a student at Kenyatta University and taking a bachelor's in science in aerospace engineering. Jael, I hope you're on. Karibu to the session, and I hope we'll have a fruitful session. Jael? Jael, are you there?
Yes, I am. I can hear you well.
Okay, thank you very much. You can hear me clearly?
Yes, yes.
The second panelist is Ongaya Caesarine Mulobi, is a young woman. She's a young woman passionate about leadership and governance. She's also very passionate about gender equality, social justice, and policy. She's a former student leader at the University of Nairobi and is pursuing her master's studies in public policy. She is the official spokesperson of the Campus Me Too campaign, which is a student-led Pan-African movement against sexual harassment. Karibu, Caesarine. Caesarine, I hope you're there.
Thank you, Maryanne. I'm here.
Asante. So my first question will be, what was that aha moment that made you say, no, we're going to stamp out sexual gender-based violence in our campuses? Caesarine, you may go first.
Okay, thank you, Maryanne, for that question. So what made me actually be part of this campaign, and you'd be surprised, most people would ask me, Caesar, why would you be part of this campaign yet you've never gone through this as an individual? And my answer is always that injustice to anyone really is still injustice, and it can be done to you or to someone close to you. A day from now, who knows? So the reason as to why I'm part of this campaign is so that is because of the stories that I would hear from people, stories of people who've never graduated, stories of people who have gone into depression because of sexual harassment, stories of people who've had missing marks, and they are frustrated that will I ever finish my studies at the university? And such, so many stories like this, I realized, you know what, it does not have to happen to me, but really I should be able to join the movement and just be able to encourage people to really speak up and to speak out and to really seek justice. So that is, for me, that is why I joined this movement. And it's also an issue of human rights. And when you look at it critically, it also touches on the whole issue of gender equality. So that is the reason as to why I campaign. Maryanne?
Thank you very much. So My question is, what are the strides that you've made so far, especially when you started? What were the challenges that you faced? Did you face backlash? Did you face any resistance and hostility from the campuses? Was the administration trying to cover up and to ensure that all these perpetrators did not face justice? What was the actual experience like?
Okay. So when we started this in 2019. Of course, which started with collecting of views from people, and that's how the statistics that Grace was talking about were found. And so when we started collecting the signatures for the petition, which we later on presented to the Ministry of Education, that was challenging because you'd ask people, you tell people, we are collecting signatures. These signatures are going towards this particular cause, and we'll just try to explain. And you'd be surprised that some students would actually be thinking otherwise, and would think, oh, students wish this upon themselves, or they take themselves, and such kind of thoughts that victims wish this upon themselves. And it's that's the major challenge, just trying to undo or make people unlearn what they've always known, and this is largely due to the socialization, and it's very common that even when you're going for TV interviews and media interviews, most of them are always asking, but we have this narrative that students take themselves, but that is not what you're talking about. What you're talking about is an issue of injustice. We're talking about issues of someone's mental life being affected, someone's life being put on hold simply because of something that really they do not deserve to go through. So that's a major challenge, misconceptions and myths about sexual harassment. And also there's a lot of ignorance as to what really sexual harassment entails. So sometimes people would actually go through sexual harassment, but then they wouldn't know that it actually is sexual harassment. So that's the main challenge. Perceptions, social perceptions, which really comes from socialization. The strides that we've been able to make as in regards with the campaign are that we've been able to now we presented the petition to the Ministry of Education, and right now we are trying to really push and see if we can have a directive from the ministry, because it's now 1 year later and we are not seeing any response from the ministry. So we are just pushing on that to ensure that we have a directive from the ministry. Right now, we're really pushing on having a sit down with a permanent secretary for the State Department of University Research and Education. That's Honorable Simon Nabukwesi, and we hope that it really materializes. And just now, before I joined this, we had an interview on KTN and Spice FM early in the morning. And some of the things that were coming up, one Senator Sylvia Kasanga was very positive about it. She said, why can't also this be pushed to Parliament? Why can't it also be forwarded to Parliament? So these are some of the things that we also we're exploring to see how best can we ensure that this is actually a reality. And we're also seeing during these 16 days of activism, we've been able to partner with several universities and just held webinars with students included, and also the lecturers, members of staff. So we have seen a lot of promise with members of staff promising to actually join in the movement and help, and versus it looking like it's students against the lecturers kind of thing. So yes, that's what we've been able to do so far.
Thank you, Cesare. I recently saw a video clip of you, and you had a press conference to petition the government on it. Please tell us about that.
Okay, so the press conference really was just basing on the fact that we presented a petition last year. It's now almost a year because we presented it on December 10th. We were just demanding to hear a response. We needed a response from the Ministry of Education. So because we already presented a memorandum, which has not yet been responded to, because we presented the memorandum sometime during just these 16 days of activism. And on the 25th, yes, on the beginning of the 16 days of activism. So what we are asking of the ministry, the presser was really just asking the ministry to shed more light or to give us a direction, because it is their responsibility. Aside from that was just to air out the testimonies of people, because of students who've been able to go through sexual harassment. So we collected hundreds of testimonials of people who've gone through sexual harassment, and just to be able to read. I'd love to read one of them as I look for it. So we just wanted to shed light on the testimonies and to show that these are actually real things that are happening and that people are actually going through that, and also just to make it look more real, because when we are talking about this, it sounds abstract. It sounds abstract, but when we now actually give the real stories of people, it makes it actually sound real. Yeah, that's what the presser was all about. Can you hear me, Maryanne?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so yeah, I would love to just read probably some of the testimonials that we collected, and there's one who says, there was a time my lecturer sent me 5,000 shillings for an Uber to a restaurant in Westlands to meet him. I refused to go, so I switched off my phone, and my friends took the money. When I came back to school that Monday morning, he summoned me to his office and started questioning why I did not show up. Before I started talking, he came close to me and wanted to kiss me. I pushed him away and ran out of the office scared. I did not go to school for 2 weeks, and when I came back, I deferred my studies. Another one says, I was going through some problems at home and I talked to my lecturer about it. He tried to kiss me and I was so confused. I did not scream or anything. I just stood up and walked out of the door. I had already had stories before I started university, but I did not really believe it. Maybe if I'd listened, I would not have found myself in that situation. I never told anyone about it. The last one, my lecturer has deliberately withheld my cut marks. When I tried to follow it up with him, he started making sexual advances towards me and told me that if I behave myself, he will give me my marks. I am very afraid to confront him or go back to his office because I do not know what he will do to me. That's it. Maryanne?
Thank you, Cesarine, for that. These are very raw and vivid experiences of young girls, and probably it's their first time they're joining university. They've never been far away from home, and it's so disheartening to find that these lecturers and these staff who are supposed to protect, to uphold, to ensure that a classroom is a safe space for them, and it's so hard. If you're a young woman, you'll probably come from a rural, this is your first time in a very urban place. It would be hard for anyone to report, and it would be hard for anyone to actually speak about it. So thank you so much for sharing that. I'd like to talk to Jael. Jael, are you there? I'll come back to you, Cesarine.
Yeah,
Jael,
yes.
yes. Thank you, Jael. Jael is the face of the Campus Me Too campaign. Jael, would you like to share your experience now being an ambassador of the Campus Me Too campaign, please?
Okay, yeah, sure. Thank you so much for the question. My experience being a Campus Me Too campaign rather activist is I have first of all, it's through this campaign that I was able to speak out my experience, because I met people who had gone through sexual harassment just like myself, and this movement has helped a lot of other students who are going through the same thing. And like like just to put it in record that the movement is a safe space for students who experience such kind of violations, such as for SGBV. Yeah, basically that's it. I don't know if there's anything more I'm supposed to say.
So when you first started Jael, did you face any type of resistance? Were your friends asking you, why are you doing this? Why were there so many whys? Please share that experience.
No, I didn't have many people asking me why I'm involved in the particular campaign, because at that time we were collecting petitions and trying to create awareness. That the students know that this is an issue, so they weren't asking why we were doing the campaign, or rather the questions that we at the beginning that we received a lot is questions that were reflecting to women, to the ladies, and to the girls in the schools to be victims. So the question that we had over and over again was, isn't it the ladies who are trying to, seduce lecturers? And yeah, that actually was the major thing that we were experiencing. And then at some point, it felt like it was a women's thing that we were trying to do, which was not really true, because our campaign was focused on both genders. It's just that from our survey, we found out that women are more likely to be abused than the men. And yeah, that's all. That's really, those two are quite of a challenge. And trying to change the mentality of students to know that when somebody is sexually harassed, they become victims. And therefore, we need to stop blaming them for whatever it is that's going on, because every other time somebody would ask us, what were they wearing? How were they behaving in class? And all these kind of things. So those were really the challenges that we faced. But otherwise, I think the campaign progressed well. We sort of had restrictions actually from universities and colleges. It was really difficult to at some point to get the administration to feel free and let us do our awareness campaign. Some institutions felt like we were trying to push out students who'd gone through this and get out here and probably taint the image of the school and stuff like that. So some administrations were, it was really difficult to help us get our work done. That's why we kept saying this campaign is not us against them, but should be like a joint team trying to achieve a safe space for all our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Jael. Let's have a discussion about how can it be 16 days of activism every day across our campuses? Let's have that discussion. How do we constantly and consistently make safe spaces for young people within campuses? And I don't just mean just in campuses, I mean from your primary school to high school. How do we make spaces across institutions of learning? What does that look like? Jael or Cesarine, you can go first.
Please come again. I lost you.
So, yes. I would like to ask, how do we create 16 days of activism every day in our campuses? How do we have a situation where it's a safe space for everyone, and anyone who feels any form of perversion and wants to to sexually harass anyone within these spaces, they feel the pressure, and they just feel the pressure of being out of place and being wrong. How do we create these safe spaces? 16 days of activism every day.
Okay, I think one of the ways that we can make sure that 16 days that does not just happen between 25th of November to 10th of December, that we make it an everyday part of our lives, that we are fighting against any form of sexual gender-based violence, any form of injustice, is by one of the ways is by ensuring that we really create a lot of awareness. The way, like right now, we know there's COVID and there's a lot of awareness. So much has been done, even messages just put everywhere. That's one of the ways we can, because as I said, one of the challenges that we're really facing, that people are really not aware of what sexual harassment is. Really do a lot of awareness of what sexual harassment entails, and why there is a need of all of us to participate in fighting against this menace. That would really go a long way. Another way is just to bring in the demands for the campaign, which Grace really elaborated quite well, and I wouldn't want to probably go into the details because most of us probably by now know, but I feel like once we implement these demands, because one of the ways, number one, is to create awareness, educational material on the same, and ensuring that people have we have structures in the universities for people to be able to report when this happens, and also just to create a culture whereby we are not blaming the victims. We are so quick in cases of sexual gender-based violence, including rape. When someone speaks up, we are very quick to always, what were you wearing? What did you do? What exactly did you contribute in ensuring that this happened to you? So just changing the whole socialization around sexual harassment, that would really go a long way in ensuring that we have safe spaces in our universities, because now we're even having people through this campaign, when you talk with people and you're engaging with people, and you let them know, this is not what sexual harassment is about, and you make them understand the issue of power dynamics, and they start to understand. And I believe human beings should be really flexible and malleable in their thinking, in such a way that you're not, when new information is introduced to you, I believe that we have the capability to be able to unlearn, learn, and also relearn. So I believe that when we continue doing this, then we are changing so many notions, and we find that even in our team, we'd had people who would blame the victims. They will, when you give them a scenario, and they'll be quick to say, but the woman did this, why was she at this place in the wrong time? But now with sensitization and education and awareness, then they're changing their thinking. So I think we should focus more on the education and creating more awareness on this particular issue, and most importantly, in line with this campaign, make sure that these 5 demands have been implemented and they're actually working. We have a problem in this country whereby we write really nice documents. I pray that this document actually gets to pass and we get direction from the ministry, but I hope it does not just sit there to look pretty, and we say that, Kenya has one of the best sexual harassment policies when it comes to the higher learning institutions, but there's nothing that's really being done about it. My prayer is that it will actually be implemented to the latter.
I'm on mute. Sorry, I'm on mute. Thank you so much, Cesarine. You've talked about a lot of socialization going on. So how can we support the campaign, and how do we become a force within the movement?
When you say we, are you referring to Youth Agenda?
I mean, Youth Agenda and other CSOs and other actors in the industry that are fighting against gender-based violence. As the agenda, we we focus on young people. We make the youth factor count, and the other CSOs within who are also working in the youth serving space. And what is your call to action to them? What would you want them to? How would you want them to join the movement?
The movement is actually open to partnerships, and we can partner in so many ways. As we speak at the moment, well, the movement is sponsored. It's student led, but it's sponsored by Action Aid Kenya, and also in support with UN Women Kenya. So there are opportunities for us to partner. We welcome opportunities to partner with other like-minded organizations. And actually, during the press release, we had another organization that just they saw information about the campaign, and they're like, you know what, I came today to see how best can we forge forward together, how best can we see that we partner to ensure that it's even more successful. So I think we are quite open to partnerships, monetary. It doesn't really have to be monetary also as well. Just technical support that would really go a long way in ensuring that this movement really builds up and that everyone knows about it, because I still don't believe that we have reached everyone. And now I've just seen a comment, someone was saying how that this is also happening in high schools and primary schools. I mean, we would want to expand this movement to reach everyone, and even thinking about how do we partner with other movements in other parts of the continent, in Namibia, in Nigeria, Uganda. We've had so many people come up, and they're speaking on this particular issue. So how do we ensure that we have a bigger movement, a more vibrant movement? We are open for that. Yes. And I think this is one of the ways that we are actually partnering with Youth Agenda. Doing this webinar is one way. It's one of the ways of partnership, because now through this webinar, the people who are going to watch it, they're going to see what is being done, and that way they get to join the movement. Yes.
Thank you so much. I will ask Jael to speak. Jael, what's the next phase of the movement? Where do you want to take this? How far can we go in fighting against gender-based violence in higher institutions of learning? What does that future look like?
Thank you. At this point, I think the Campus Meet You campaign is really focused on getting the Ministry of Education, to be specific, the State Department for Universities, Education and Research on board with our campaign, and aimed at ensuring safety within our universities. So we really need the Ministry of Education to speak up about this and give us a directive and a go ahead to get the demands of our campaign implemented in each and every institution. At this point, I'm really sure that, I don't know if it's a general feeling with everyone else who's involved in the campaign and is an ambassador, but I think at this point, legislation is something that we need to be drumming up on until we get this sexual harassment in campuses and colleges talked about at the national level, and we get the administrations of our institutions to implement this. Then there's not much we can do. So I think all our focus at the moment is directed towards that. Yeah.
Thank you, Jael. Sorry. The last question will be to Cesarine. Cesarine, the other campuses in rural places, in colleges and polytechnics, how do they join the movement? Talk about your social media, tell us how they join the movement, and maybe one of them will randomly land on this clip on YouTube and be like, okay, so what's happening? So what's your message to them when it comes to ending sexual gender-based violence in their spaces?
Okay, so if one is willing to join the movement, first of all, just to make it clear that while our survey focused on Nairobi and its environs, we really are just talking about sexual harassment in all universities in Kenya, and also TVETs and vocational training centers, TTCs, teachers training colleges, any higher learning institution. So they can be able to join us. You can reach us out. You can reach out to us via any social media handles. We are on all social media handles at Campus Me Too. We also have a website, www.campusme2, and it just on the website we have every single material about the campaign. So if you want to know more about the campaign, where it started, the survey, students' toolkit, how do they report, the lecturer's toolkit, if you're a parent and your child is going through sexual harassment, how do you go about it? So all that information is on the website of the Campus Me Too. And yes, once you reach out to us via social media, we'll be able to guide you in how you can best plug in. And it will also be very good if we get people plugging in from rural areas and other parts in the country. We will be able to establish how can they be ambassadors of the movement, because we are currently having so many ambassadors in the Nairobi region, but how do we get to spread out to every other part of the country? Yeah. Maryanne, unmute. We can't hear you.
Sorry. Thank you so much, Cesarine. To everyone who's joined in the call, thank you so much. So far, so good. We've had the experiences of Cesarine and Jael being ambassadors of the Campus Me Too campaign. Please join in on their social media. It's Campus Me Too, and we're airing this live on YouTube, so you would be able to share this material at the youth agenda. So thank you so much, Jael and Cesarine. I'd like to move on to our third panelist. Our third panelist is Peris Mwangi. So Peris works for HI International, Humanity and Inclusion. So Peris is an educator committed to finding processes that help nurture connections between people, their communities, and their surrounding environments. She endeavors to uncover new perspectives, draw attention to important narratives, and help contribute to positive change. She's currently a project officer at Humanity and Inclusion in a professional fellows program that seeks to have mid-career professionals learn about disability inclusive employment and work towards promoting the same. So she has volunteered and managed volunteers who advocate for vulnerable people in society, especially people with disabilities. Karibu, Peris.
Thank you, Maryanne. Sorry, I have a cold. That's why my voice is hoarse.
It's all right. We completely understand. So, Peris, I know in your work every day you meet diverse people, and they're always diverse. There's a lot of diversity to learn from these people and how to be accommodative of their needs. Tell us about the experiences of people living with disabilities, especially now working at Humanity and Inclusion. What is their day-to-day life, getting around, reading, going to school? What is their day-to-day life like?
Right. Thank you so much, Maryanne, and thank you for everyone else who is listening in. I'd like to speak about everyone's progression from one stage of life to another. So let's just begin with the fact that you've just been born. And of course, with having a child with disability, it comes with the aspect of rejection, because everyone views the disability as a disfigurement, and hence they are rejected from the word go. And then we look at how do they progress. So one, of course, accessing health facilities becomes an issue. And after the rejection, you'll find that they'll also develop other difficulties as they grow up. Two, because of the financial status that most kids with disabilities are born into, they are not provided with the proper nutrition, which also leads now to them not really being very strong in sense of their immunity. Once we get into school, access and participation in school becomes an issue because most of these kids will start school late. Right. Then from there, we also now see an issue in the literacy levels of girls and women with disabilities. Of course, we already see that women with or without disabilities have a disadvantage in an African society, and basically, I think in any other society. But now, an added difficulty comes in when you have a disability. Then these kids will grow up, and then we will have issues when it comes to accessing health, because say, for example, you have a hearing impairment, then that means that accessing health services will present a challenge, because where do we actually have sign language interpreters? Presents an issue of social cycle to access these services. Then we also have an issue of housing, and I would like to think about where you are currently living. Do you feel like you are living in a place that is accessible to people with disabilities? Do anyone with a disability can live? I do not know, but as for where I currently live, no, it is not accessible. So those are the challenges that we see. And then now, as adults, women, young women, and have issues accessing job market. Then they will have issues retaining that job, because sometimes, yes, entering could be, we need numbers, we need to show that we are diverse, we need to show that we have people with disability. But now retaining that, actually promoting, and promotion comes with, of course, access to training so that you can grow. And then, of course, the paid work, are they being paid the same as people without disabilities? Are they being paid the same as people with disabilities? Cases they're paid lower. And now, as much as economic decision making is concerned, we have an issue of access to credit. Can women or young in workforce who have disabilities access credit services? Are they able to? No, because they're just having so many constraints that put them aside. So when we think about all those things, we realize that now another issue that comes on board is the gender-based violence, which is a vice that goes beyond social and economic and geographic precincts. So this is where we have power disparities between both sexes. And gender-based violence is fueled by things to do with cultural norms, social acceptance of certain things, and also the inadequate legal protection that comes into it. So these are things that women and girls with disabilities have to live with on a day-to-day sort of life. And when we think about even now, so say we have women with disabilities who've made it to a level where we feel very proud about them, then there's always this aspect of their family asking, we helped you get to that point, so you need to pay us. So they feel that they are entitled to a certain payback for the hassle that they had to go through to actually get the person to school. And now that they are successful in their field, their family feels that they are entitled to a certain level of payback. And girls with disabilities will forever be feeling as if they are not enough, or as if they owe someone an explanation as to why they deserve better, which is quite difficult. And honestly, it's something that we need to see stop.
Thank you so much, Peris. So what I'm hearing here is an issue of double discrimination. You have a disability, you are discriminated at your workplace because you have a disability. You're also discriminated in housing. In short, there are no services that are mainstreamed for people with disabilities to access easily. Their lives are not put into account in terms of planning and development and putting into place structures that ensure their lives are easier. So at this point, how far have we come in terms of disability inclusion? Then we can now go and talk, and then we can now just go trickle down to talk about gender-based violence in the context of people living with disabilities.
So thank you for the question. As far as women and girls with disabilities are concerned, we want it to be seen as, especially because most of the work they do is home-based, so they're probably left doing the improves. They are considered as people who do not know where the food comes from, where the money comes from. But we want to say that that work should be considered economically, because anyone can actually pay for that. So whatever effort they are put into in creating funds. Secondly, I would like to say that as far as inclusion is concerned, we are trying to make sure that more and more people are aware of what their workplaces needs to have. For example, if you're working in an office, women and people with disabilities are encouraged to apply. Have you actually considered that if you do have these people with disabilities, what reasonable accommodation going to put in place just at the interview stage of this position to ensure that this person feels accommodated and accepted in that workplace? So this person hasn't even gotten the job, but in the interview process, are you willing to reach out to help interview venue, probably have a taxi provided? So those are things that we need to look into, as well as we need to look into the fact that girls and women with disabilities come with a lot of knowledge and skills, and we need to tap into those. Those are things that we need to reach out and understand that they may have a disability, but they come with a lot of knowledge and skills that can be tapped into, and they're quite creative. So our inclusion needs to encompass everyone, and majorly, especially those people without disabilities, because people with disabilities face discrimination from people without disabilities. And so we need to have a whole discussion and acceptance of people with disabilities in our workplaces, in our churches, in our institutions, and just feel that they may have a few things that are different, but intellectually and just by the fact that they are humans, they deserve definitely to be included in our spaces.
Thank you, Peris. So let's talk about what it means for people living with disability, and now especially young women and girls. What do these 16 days of activism mean to them? Are we making any progress in terms of inclusion, ensuring that the rights of people with disabilities are upheld? Are we even trying to prevent violence in our household, respond to it? Are hospitals and nurses ready, and police centers and safe houses ready to accommodate people with disabilities, and now especially young women and girls, because they face the brunt of sexual gender-based violence, physical gender-based violence? Let's talk about what that means to you as humanity and inclusion.
For me, I'm inclined to say that we are making progress, that the story of inclusion is being heard. But recently, we are seeing reports on social media of safe houses being raided, and these are places where victims of violence are supposed to feel safe. And now it even becomes worse when you have a disability, because if you do not have a safe place at home with your relatives, and then someone else picks you up and actually gives you a place to be, and then now that becomes also a place where hostility comes in, then we are saying that, you know, we still have a long way to go. There's also this aspect of gender-based violence in the sense that when someone reports to have been violated, they also want to hear the other side of the story. But then again, that feels as if we are now victim shaming, and we are now trying to look at it in the sense of, what about the other side of the story? The other person can speak for themselves. I believe that. So this person who has actually come out to say, you know, I think my daughter was raped because she has a intellectual disability, which is usually the case because ladies who have intellectual disabilities are more vulnerable and not really able to express themselves as much, and hence many people will take advantage of that. So I would be inclined to say that we are making progress, especially with such forums, but I feel that we still have a long way to go. And I think we have learned a lot from the COVID-19 situation, where we saw a spike in gender-based violence cases. And so I feel that we still have a lot to do, and that is where every individual's input is required.
Thank you, Peris. Let's describe vividly the types of violence faced by young women and girls. How do they face violence, from the informal settlements to a normal day-to-day life trying to get to work? So what types of GBV are seen across all board for them?
So one, we have the usual one that can be seen. We have the physical type. Then we have the sexual violence. We also have emotional or manipulative violence. And we have neglect. We have financial abuse. So why do you think women and girls, especially, face this? Is because one, we have the cultural acceptance of that we are weaker, we are the weaker gender, and so we are supposed to probably face it tough in life. But then again, it doesn't really feel as it should, because we as women have come such a long way. We are now holding spaces that usually were just held for men. And so I feel that with these various violence types and abuses, we need to speak out, and we need to create safe spaces where women can speak out. And unfortunately, we are our own enemies. We tend not to support other women and girls when they speak about it. And I hope we also the Lugulu girls situation, whereby the girls marched out of school and actually went to the OCS to report an attempted rape. And I feel so glad about such situations being reported, because it means that the generation behind us is learning to be more accepting of breaking barriers. They
Peris, you're frozen. Peris?
Are learning to fight. I hope that we are seeing more changes, especially in the generation behind us, of people building a voice. And we, as the people who have gone ahead and said this, need to encourage young girls to speak out. Have the Campus Me Too initiative that is really helping young girls and people who are in campuses to have a safe area to speak.
How do we mainstream our spaces to ensure that the rights of people's girls and young women from the workplace to matatus to homes to every space that any person living with disability occupies, how do we mainstream issues? How do we mainstream issues and make the necessary accommodations for them? How do we do that?
Maryanne, I've lost you.
Pardon me?
I can't hear you. Sorry, I lost you for a while.
Okay, so I'm asking, how do we mainstream the issues and make necessary accommodations for people, and especially girls living with disabilities and young women living with disabilities? How do we mainstream these issues in our day-to-day life? Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. I am so sorry for that. So it appears that our account has been hacked and someone is playing that nudity. My apologies for that. There is a character called One who just joined and they were playing from our side, but you've shut it down. I'm so sorry for that. My apologies. Allow us to continue with our discussion. I hope everyone is okay. Let's continue the discussion. Peris, are you still there? Peris?
Yes, Maryanne, I am.
Okay, I'm so sorry for
yes,
that.
Maryanne.
I'm saying I'm so sorry for that, and yeah, we've shut that down. So we were talking about making our spaces inclusive for people living with disabilities, and ensuring that even the sexual harassment policies that barely speak about the rights of young women living with disabilities at the workplace are protected. So how do we do that? Before you speak, Kay, I would like to speak.
Sorry, Maryanne and colleagues and panelists. I wish just to put an emphasis on what Maryanne said. Unfortunately, we've been hacked by a person by the name Juan, and we tried our best to try and sort out the issue. We regret this, and we continue to work hard to ensure that such opportunities never arise. The challenge of coming to digital space and inviting people to join the Zoom meetings. Please bear with us, and I would urge just that we proceed and finalize the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken, for that. Let's continue the meeting. Peris, back to you.
Hi, Maryanne. Could you please repeat your question?
I've asked you about with how we make our spaces more disability inclusive and streamline them to ensure and protect people living with disability from any GBV, any form of gender-based violence.
Thank you, Maryanne. So the first thing is to first accept that we are human beings and human beings are diverse. That is why our names, our looks, we look different, we have different names. That means that we are diverse. And hence, it means that even our qualities and our benefits in this world are diverse. And so inclusion only brings together all these diverse thoughts and skills into play. So how do we create an inclusive environment? So the first thing is, of course, ensuring that our attitude is the major thing. Having changed our attitude from the aspect of disability is not about not being able to do something. There are many people who are born with disabilities for whatever reasons. There are people who develop them later on in age. So one is how our attitudes are. That is a major thing. Then secondly, we need to have accessibility. Is it physical? Is it with assistive devices? We need to ensure that every space that we go into is accessible. That means that anyone who could be using crutches, could be using wheelchairs, is able to access a certain service. Be aware that human rights are universal. So based on the fact that you are human, you have the human DNA running in your blood, then that means that you deserve to be treated as a human. And we walk around knowing that people deserve to be treated as humans, then or without disability, as a human being and as we would want to be treated as.
Peris, how do we ensure that our spaces are 16 days? We ensure that there are safe spaces. I mean, how do we implement 16 days of activism every day?
Sorry, Maryanne?
I'm asking, how do we ensure it's 16 days of activism every day?
Hear you.
Peris?
Yes, I can hear you now.
I'm asking,
Yes.
how do we ensure our spaces are 16 days of activism every day?
As long as girls and women with disabilities fear for their safety, then they are not able to realize their full potential, be it in educational spaces or in work spaces or in economic forum. So one, we need to ensure that our girls and women with disabilities feel safe. And mainly that comes from those who live with them, those who work with them. So if you create a safe space for a person with disability, then you will ensure that they're more confident in reaching their potential. So how do we ensure that this is something that we can do day to day? I feel one is having men in the discussion. Men are the bearers of culture. And so for a certain culture to come to a stop, we need men to speak out also. And so if women and girls are facing discrimination from men, then we need them to speak out and actually stop it. So see if a fellow man sees his counterpart probably discriminating a woman or a man, then they need to also face some form of violence. Having the cultural bearers in the discussion is how we're going to create a safe space. As an individual, we need to accept that we have our own prejudices, we have our own thoughts about certain issues. And so we need to be aware that we need to have an open mind when dealing with issues to do with gender-based violence and people with disabilities, as they are quite sensitive. And so we need to be willing to learn. And that is where we have initiatives to partner with other organizations so that we can inform them of inclusive, safe spaces whereby people with disabilities can speak about the issues that they are facing, and also have people just discuss. So yes, we really do want to have an inclusive workspace, but do we actually have what it takes? And you would actually find that whatever it takes to have an inclusive workspace it doesn't even require a lot of financial commitment. The major thing that we need to change is our attitude for us to be more open-minded, and to also change whatever notions that we have carried on from childhood.
Thank you, Peris. What is your call to action to all actors in the industry in preventing, responding, funding, and even collecting data on gender-based violence when it comes to people living with disability, and with a disaggregated look on now young women?
My call to action is that let's not view these issues as a private matter. Let us view it as something that could affect you one day or someone else that is close to you. And now, not casting a blind eye to these issues. I know culturally, especially in an African context, we are told that leave those issues. Those are private matters, those are family matters. But the more we go silent, the more these issues will carry on culturally. So my call to action is for everyone to take a personal initiative, to know that they have a responsibility to end the vice, and to know that they have a personal initiative to uplift people with disabilities in educational spaces or in economic spaces. And my call to action is to know that these are people who deserve the best, and so we need to provide the best for them.
Thank you so much, Peris. Thank you so much, Peris, for sharing your call to action and just talking and sharing the experiences of people living with disabilities. My last question will be, how do we join you? How do we join you? Do you have, if we have, as Youth Agenda, as ActionAid, as Refugee, or any other institution, how do we join you? Do you have material that you can share with us to increase our capacity and agency when it comes to ensuring there is inclusion within our workspaces, streamlining disability-friendly policies? How do we join you to ensure there is humanity and inclusion?
Yes, Maryanne, humanity and inclusion is open to partnership with anyone who is willing to learn, and we look forward to reaching out to more and more people. So for anyone who is interested to reaching out to us, we have our contacts. Of course, you have our contacts as the organizer of this, and we are open to having discussions. We are open to learning from other organizations also, as we cannot carry ourselves as people who know it all. So we are also open to know what is changing in the disability world, and we are definitely open for partnership. So yes, we do have materials, we do have planned activities that we have, that we include other organizations, and so anyone interested partnering with us can reach out to us. We are open for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Peris. I think from our side, we're looking forward to ensure that there is inclusion in terms of the work we do in informing inclusion in our programming. We'll be in contact with you to ensure that we find ways to mainstream everything, and that your expertise is put into good use in ensuring that especially young people who are looking for employment and are stuck and they're facing discrimination, they're also included in the process of planning and in the process of governance and development. So thank you so much, Peris. I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to move on to our next panelist, who's going to talk about gender-based violence in the context of the workplace. So our next panelist is Masinduku. So Masinduku is a certified human resource practitioner in Kenya, and she's also a certified mentor, an executive coach, and a HR consultant. So she has served in the HR profession for the last 18 years in various organizations. During her employment, she has been involved in several programs at encouraging, positioning, and mentoring young women and women professionals at the workplace and other professional engagements. So Mercy is also a founder member of Youth Agenda, and is also a board director, currently a board director for the Youth Agenda. She's very passionate about working with the youth and women, and we are very, very happy to have her on board and have her share her experience at the workplace. So Mercy, karibu.
Thank you, Maryanne. Hello, everyone.
Hello. So Mercy, I think we'll just start off by talking about what does the 16 days of activism mean to you right now as a HR professional, and what does it mean to have 16 days of activism at the workplace? Let's start off there.
Thank you. For me, and speaking on behalf of the workplace professionals, the 16 days of activism implies that they need to make it more practical in the things we do every day and the things we say, so that then it can be a realistic program or journey that employees can engage in. Let me break it down. The workplace is managed through a lot of policies and procedures and standard operating procedures that people don't bother about most of the time. You know, it is there, you'll refer to it when you need it. But 16 days of activism is when you bring it alive, that we are able to sort of revisit those provisions that sort of amplify the voice of young women and generally women at the workplace, in making them be aware what is expected of them, how we conduct ourselves at the workplace, and reminding them there's certain provisions that have been put in place to protect and prevent this kind of violations from taking place. It's only when you use this kind of events to amplify that you'll hear people say, oh, I didn't know we have that provision. Oh, I didn't know that actually we are supposed to speak out about certain things. Things that we live with them every day in our policy documents, but we hardly get to visit them. So it provides us that opportunity to do so.
So in your profession, what is the day-to-day life like? What is the describe what is the day-to-day life like, safeguarding the issues of employees within the workplace? And how has COVID also disrupted that safe space for employees? How has that completely changed? Please talk about that.
Okay. Day-to-day life, especially if I speak from a human resource professional point of view, is that it's a people relational kind of day. Yeah, one day is not the same as the other. And as much as everyone is clear about what they need to do at the workplace, the job descriptions are clear, articulate what they need to do, you'll realize there's a lot of the social and the soft application of the soft skills that are done either in the course of the work or in between work sessions, where you're relating with people on a day-to-day basis. You are advising, you are mentoring, you are counseling, you are guiding. There are all these in-betweens that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So at the end of the day, you're looking back at how have I impacted so-and-so who was in a difficult situation? How have I counseled somebody who was in a dilemma? How did I remind a boss on the need to follow this particular procedure? How did I apply fairness when it comes to issues maybe of disciplinary or performance? So it's varied, but again, as I say, it's more relational. You are dealing with human beings on a day-to-day basis, but each one with a unique approach and expecting you to meet them at their different levels, whether it's a junior or a senior or the CEO, in the course of guiding them to help them do their work better. But at the same time, infusing a conducive environment where everybody feels safe, feels that they can do their work without any intimidation. So it's varied, but that's what it is. Now, with the pandemic, the COVID impact of the same is that we have very lean working structures at the moment operating at the workplace, as you may know. A lot of working at home and putting in place certain new work arrangements where people are working with a lot of social distance in between. You're finding some of those day-to-day processes we're not able to sort of follow through. Yeah, we will probably make a call on Monday and on online and say, is everybody okay? Please, if you have any issue, let me know. And that's it. And then probably you'll connect again at the end of the week or the following week. So that day-to-day touch has been eroded. We also know, and maybe another speaker will be talking about the impact this is having at the homes, at the different places where we reside, the family dynamics and what especially COVID has brought to place where some people have been laid off, others are on unpaid leave, and the socioeconomic impacts that have had to come at play. Now you can imagine that in addition to work pressure and the disadvantaged place of especially young women, how that all complexes the ability for one to perform at their utmost. So from a position of an HR person, to understand the different intricate experiences that each one is going through, especially at home, it becomes a challenge. Sometimes we do not get somebody to tell us what they're going through, but by looking at the body language, the way their demeanor, you can be able to tell there's something that is missing somewhere. But when they're at home, when they're working remotely, when now we have shift system whereby one colleague is at the office, the other one is working at home, and they keep on, coming in at different shifts at the workplaces, you are not able to connect the full picture. So and so is not relating well with the other. So all these are implications of the new normal we are living in, especially with COVID. And has made us now to start thinking of new ways. How do I still maintain that social, that relational contact with the staff, even when they're away? Yeah, and probably we'll be discussing that later on.
Thank you, Mercy. There's one question that I'd like to ask you from the HR's side. During the pandemic, have women been facing GBV in their homes, and are they able to talk about that in the workplace? And there is also the burden of unpaid care work at home. You're the mother, you're the wife, you do everything. You're expected also to work. And how has the COVID pandemic affected how women thrive at the workplace? Have they been abused and they're not able to report? What does that look like?
Thank you for that question, Maryanne. Yes, there have been varied cases to different degrees. As I've said again, the dynamics and the work arrangements that have had to be put in place, especially with the onset of COVID, has even made it much more challenging to be able to openly engage with those that probably are more confident to come forward and report so. But there are many others that you'll have to sort of devise ways of digging deeper to find out what is going on. For a seasoned HR person, you probably need to start digging deeper in terms of work pattern. Is this person still performing at their utmost? Have they been reporting regularly at work when they're supposed to? How often are they communicating when you have like weekly, get together? Are they there? How do they look? Some of these things they do not say. So let me say also that the workplace is very diverse. We have different workplaces with different work cultures. There are those that have created a very open, enabling environment where people can easily come forth and speak, and they will say, they will use whatever channels that have been put in place to voice. We have heard of cases of GBV, especially for the young women, not because the other women do not, but just because you can quickly be able to start seeing changes of how they were performing, how they are relating, so you can be able to start detecting that. But unless the environment is encouraging and it's conducive for them to be able to speak up, most of them are quiet because people are also not meeting dailies. They are on their different homes. It takes a creative person, not necessarily an HR person, but a manager who will be able to follow up through and call somebody and say, are you okay? How are you coping? Again, this is also made complex with the fact that the children who are supposed to be in school are also at home. So the burden of parenting, working from home, others not even having means of earning to the level that they can be able to meet the obligations the way they would do when they were on full pay, because as you know, some people have had to deal with reduced earnings in order to survive. So all this has put a lot of pressure in the homes, in the families, in their relationship with their spouses or siblings, whoever they live with. There have been some strains in terms of the way they coped with the situation earlier on. Now things are a bit more stringent, and not having immediate letouts of where can I take my frustration. There are cases of depression where people are not speaking. As you know, most people or employees spend 3/4 of their lives at the workplace. And that is where probably people would find an easier way of letting out, an easier way of, confiding in somebody. This is not there, it's not readily available. So who do they speak to? And where do they take their frustrations to? So we have seen cases have been reported of violence, cases of depression is on the high, especially people who are working and who are probably at the moment on a break because of maybe they have been laid off or work has reduced. There are cases where people have actually now have become sick. So also organizations have to look at the welfare arrangement of organization to take care of people who are sick. How are they being taken care of? And things like that. So yes, COVID impacts to people, especially at the workplace, has gone beyond into their homes and has had quite an impact in terms of their health and their relationships. Thanks, Maryanne.
Thank you for sharing that vivid description of how young women and how families are going through the pandemic. It's true, some of us have been retrenched this year, have gotten back up, and life is not the same. There's an increased level of violence, especially because of frustrations. There's so many demands to meet, yet the financial, you're unable to meet those obligations. And so you project that frustration in form of fists, in form of manipulation, in form of anger projection and emotional abuse. So thank you so much for that. Please describe to the audience vividly the forms of gender-based violence experienced by young women in the workplace, or even the young men at the workplace. And we may also share, if it's possible and you're comfortable, some accounts in your profession that stood out when it came to gender-based violence.
Thank you. Let me just paint for you some few scenarios that have become very typical in the workplace, and knowing very well the rate of unemployment in the country, the few that have work to do, what they have to deal with. Again, let me also say that these forms of gender-based violence vary from one industry to another. The workplace is very huge. It's very diverse. We might not give it justice today with the time that we have. You're talking about those that are based in the agricultural sector. That's still a workplace. In the manufacturing, where you have majority of young women based at the shop floor, where they're just sort of doing the packaging, managing the conveyor belt. Transport and logistics, yeah, your organizations that have long distance trackers and the challenges that have to do with those that are trying to get into such kind of spaces. You have the professional, the service rendering organizations that probably are in an office setup. So there are different experiences that you'll find in those different industries. Let me paint an example. You have sales executive. It's a person who's driven, it's ambition. You work based on commission. You're trying to meet your numbers. There are targets to be met. And these are things that I've actually encountered where you're going out to close a business and you're asked to dress appropriately as a lady so that then you'll be able to encourage the would-be big client to sign up. So make sure tomorrow you put in your best. And what does your best mean? How do you present yourself? It's not clear, it's not perfect, but it has some insinuations of make sure you work your way into us getting the business, And there's one particular case I dealt with that. Issues of promotion, yeah, issues of promotion. And you have all been eyeing that next level of growth in your career. And this has clarity in terms of what you need to have, kind of competencies and skills that you need to have built into to fit into the next level. Yet there's a senior executive who has to make a decision on who fits that best based on certain things. And sometimes you'd go in as an HR person who is like the voice of reason and say, why didn't someone so get this role and not the other one? Seeing the kind of credentials and the the experience she's built in, and here, she just didn't speak for me. She didn't speak for me. I just didn't feel her. So those kind of, so the way the violence or the harassment is manifested, it's in ways that vary, and some of them are very subtle. Unless you wear the lenses, you may not be able to tell. There's an intern here who is eager to get the acceptance and confirmation after the period of internship. Yeah. And she's trying to ask around, what else do I need to learn? How else do I fit into this culture? Yet there will be somebody who's be expecting a certain favor for them to have them confirmed. There's that lady who's probably waiting at the gate for that daily wage role at the industry area or a weekly contract. And she has to deal with a supervisor at the gate who decides what will he get in return if she gets the next 1 week contract or 1 month contract. So there are different ways that, unless, as I said, you wear the lens, you might not be able to tell, because the workplace of today is not really rife with fist fights and physical violence. Yes, they do occur, but they are not as rampant as a subtle psychological, emotional, mannerisms that point towards harassment. Then, of course, the other aspect is the policy. We are expected as HR practitioners and employers to have very sound policy that now provides that platform for equality, for affirmative action, especially where we're trying to encourage a level of inclusion of, say, young ladies or women into certain positions that have been dominated by one particular gender, maybe the male gender. So you'll find that not all organizations have as comprehensive and as intentional the provisions in terms of policy that encourage that. I am doing HR advisory work and consultancy at the moment, and I go to organizations and say, please, can I see your sexual harassment or discrimination policies? There is none. There is none. So we have so much of lip service in terms of this is what we do. Everybody is equal. Everybody can work their way up to the highest level of the organization. Yet, unless you get to understand it from the angle of the disadvantages that have sort of become barriers to young women ascending to some of these positions or being regarded as equals, it's very hard for you to tell. Yeah, it's very hard for one to tell, but this obviously happens. How does it sometimes happen? It's more of threats. If you don't do this, then you're likely not to get your contract renewed. So there are threats. There's of course shaming, as one of them has also shared. There's shaming. Will I be seen? I'm the one who was caught in a very compromising situation, so I will not say it. So you keep quiet. And even if it comes out pointing towards the person who's the lady or the person who's facing the discrimination in a way that does not tell the full story of exactly what has happened. So someone says, I don't want to be in the public glare in the organization, so I will call back. Socially, you can actually sort of put like a stigma in a way that no one wants to associate with you anymore. You hear the person when they're asking, where will she be transferred? And everyone says, don't bring her to my department. So you get sort of isolated within the organization simply because you speak out too much. This one will come and start reporting things here. So again, you're likely to be kept at bay. So all this fear, there's always fear. You don't know what's next. You don't want to offend anybody. So you can't speak out because it might cost you your job. And I could go on with some of these examples, but really this is how it manifests. And yes, it's not just the young women, but also even the young men, and especially at the entry level. when they have had to deal with bosses that have other agendas. Yeah, we've had somebody who's been on a position for many, and you come and ask, why hasn't this person been looked at? Are they either performing? Why are they being confirmed? They're still on acting capacity, or they have never been any growth in their career within the organization. And again, you'll hear, when you dig deeper, then you'll get to see there are other reasons that are not being said that point towards harassment or sexual harassment at the workplace. Thank you, Maryanne.
Thank you, Mercy. You've talked about, it's actually subtle, that GBV at the workplace, it's subtle, it's threats, it's being shunned away and being isolated from the other people. Is it an issue of values? We don't have value-driven workspaces. What is the main cause? What is the solution to this?
You're right. It could be the culture. Most of the time, it's the culture. As you know, in an organization, for culture to really, if you want to drive a particular culture in an organization, assuming you want to drive a very positive, inclusive, where and appreciated, and they can speak up, then it has to start from the top, the organization. You have to endear to the top and build a tone at the top of the organization. This means the head of the organization, the CEO, the board in some of the organization, heads of divisions. You have to build that from the top so that then now it can cascade down to everybody, and the people can look up and see if the CEO is coming down to talk to us in our workplaces, in the factory. If the CEO is involved in observing certain programs that we have laid out that touch on women, touch on young women and career growth, touch on the welfare issues of staff, then the culture now can stabilize and be accepted. That is the way it should be. But unfortunately, in some organizations, either deliberately or not deliberately, but if you find the top of the organization, they're just focused on performance, numbers, performance. We have to be seen to be performing. At the same time, at the expense of what? At the expense of whoever will fit into the agenda. If you do not fit, if you're asking divergent question, you are kept aside, or you're separated from the organization. So it could be a cause of gender, because once there's that, I worked in an organization where I had a CEO who would come shaking hands, everybody in the organization, are you okay? How was your weekend? How is your family? By the way, how is it? That's son of yours, where is he now? You know, with that, you start feeling, oh, this is a caring organization. When I've been faced with an issue, especially to do with a violation of human rights issue to do with either being a young woman or being just a woman, I know I can approach this CEO and tell him, and he will understand. And he's a man, he's male. So culture plays a very big role. But also the organizations where best practice has not been put in place, and best practices comes in this way. How do we handle these things when they happen? How do we know these things are happening? How do we create awareness that these things are likely to happen, and when they happen, this is what you do? This is why I was talking about the instruments of policies and procedures. These are very important in this sense. Today, you'll have a situation where somebody has faced an act of discrimination or harassment, and they come and report. You deal with it, you discuss internally and decide, we'll deal with it. You just go back to your work and it's over and it's shelved. Tomorrow, a similar case or near similar situation will arise, but because there's no policy, you deal with it in a different way. So you find there are a lot of inconsistencies in the way we, intervention methods are put in place. That's really begging the need for a sound and comprehensive policy in place. in my experience, going to most of these workplaces as I advise different employers, the policies are very scanty if they're there. And those that have them, you'll see there's also a difference in the way they manage the staff when such issues arise, whereas in others, they are non-existent. Yeah, I give an example, like the transport and logistics. You know, we have our ambitious children who we have told them, you can be who you want to be. So when you go to such industries, you'll find their engineering jobs, their mechanics jobs, their driver jobs, and they're told this is not for you. Your work, you'll sit in the office, you'll count this, you'll plan that, but yet they came to work and they came with the credentials and the qualifications that need to be. So how do they respond? Most of them, if you ask, they say, but generally for women, they cannot manage. This is not a women kind of place, you know, that kind of comments. It's a form of discrimination. It's a form of harassment in a way. Some are changing, especially those that have been exposed and have had to go through certain trainings. Others are still yet to catch up. So you'll find the policies are skewed as well. So I would say culture is one of the ways, but also internal structures and tools and instruments that ensure that when it happens, there's a certain process that needs to be addressed. Lastly, I'll talk about is also awareness. When you talk about awareness, especially the workplace, you need to look at a wider stakeholder kind of engagement approach, whereby you have different awareness sessions for employees, for managers, for union leaders. Don't forget the workplace also, we interact daily with employee representation through the union leaders, the employers, yeah, the boards, so that then there's a whole alignment of what is expected. Otherwise, you'll have very empowered and informed employees, but they dare speak because the top echelons have not been converted. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mercy. That brings me to the question of, are there legal procedures talking about safeguarding policies from COTU? Let's talk about COTU that deals with, COTU deals with workers, and then we have the Federation of Kenyan Employers. Is there any legal standing where they speak about safeguarding policies within the workplace? Are companies, before registering, when they are being formed, before registering, are they asked for policies, safeguarding policies, HR policies? Is there any legal binding procedure to that?
That's a very good question, and very, very applicable, especially in our Kenyan situation, because some countries, I would say they're probably way ahead. In Kenya, it's a mixed bag. Let me say this. There's been efforts, especially in the tripartite agreements and working relationship between FKE, that's the Federation of Kenya Employers, and COTU, being the umbrella body that represents the different industry unions governing different industries. And then, of course, the workplace, yeah, the employer. So in terms of legal processes or procedures, there's been a lot that has been done to address, to some extent, the current employment or legislation, labor legislation that touch on the workplace. Yeah, in the past, if you remember, the previous Employment Act that we had, Cap 226, that had been done in the late 70s, early 80s, we had nothing mentioning, no mention of anything about sexual harassment or discrimination at the workplace. Now we have it in the last review that was done in 2019. We have it. And interesting enough, it says an employer who has 20 employees and above should consider putting in place a sexual harassment policy. I think most employers would want to do that just to the minimum that it takes. It covers them from, any exposure in case anything like that happens. Because when such a matter blows out of proportion, out of the organization, maybe to the court corridors, then the first question will be, give us your policy. Do you have a provision that? So they will do the minimum that needs to be done. However, I think what we've lacked in this country is enforcement. Policy, monitoring, enforcement has failed in the sense that the labor officers from the Ministry of Labor and Social Services, and I think that's how they call it, we have lacked a way of coming to check and enforce what is happening in the workplace. You remember, when I was starting my HR career, we'll be told there's a day when the labor officers will be coming to check conditions of work, ventilation, the lighting, the ergonomics, and that's the seating plan of employees, so that there's just a good work environment that is stipulated in the health and safety regulations under the Ministry of Labor. But just coming to check and scrutinize employers whether they have sufficient or adequate provisions in terms of the policies that touch especially on discrimination and sexual harassment, that is not happening. Again, they just say it's too vast, we do not have enough hands to do that. So what happens is that, especially the place of the union has really done quite a bit. There's been a great milestone in the sense that when you are negotiating under the Industrial Relations Charter, you're negotiating normally 2-year collective bargaining agreements with employers. And I hope I'm not speaking jargons. I hope I can, if you feel you want me to explain, I can break it down further. Collective bargaining agreements, these are agreements that bind the employer and the unionized employees on how they are going to relate and work for the next 2 years. And probably you've seen in the media in the past where there have been people downing tools or strikes that have been, notices that have been issued by unions. It all governed under this arrangement or agreement called the CBA, collective bargaining agreements. So they stipulate not only terms of payment and increments and all that, but also conditions of work. Yeah, in organizations where there have been heightened reports of, sexual harassment or gender-based violence or just violence at the workplace, you'll find certain provisions the union has pushed to say, in case this is found, this is the procedure with which the matter will be pursued all the way to the legal, if somebody wants to follow the redress through the legal procedure. So there'll be clarity in terms of disciplinary, and somebody has been accused of probably of sexual harassment. This is the process with it you'll take through our members. Now, are their members, people who have agreed to join the union to be represented under the union. But don't forget there are people also who are outside the union who are within the same organization. Sometimes it's 50-50. I worked in an organization where it was 50-50. So who speaks for the other lot? The other lot will be covered under the policy. So if the policy is not sufficient, again, then you have issues there. So there's aspect of enforcement, goodwill, especially from the industry, the ministry, to want to take it further to put employers into account, but also just sheer corporate responsibility by employers to want to espouse best practice in the workplace. Yeah. So I'll probably put it in a nutshell that way.
Thank you, Marcy. Let's talk about access to justice to survivors of gender-based violence. And when I talk about access to justice for survivors, is within the sexual harassment policies at the workplace. Does the perpetrator, either man or woman, do they face termination of their contract? Is it spoken out? Is it spoken out openly that there should be no sexual gender-based violence at the workplace? How does that work?
Okay. Again, varying from organization to organization or industry to industry, there have been probably different experiences. Ideally, the procedure within the organization, because first we encourage either when you have these kind of cases, an internal process within the organization would be ideal to start with. And thereafter, if somebody feels they still need to seek further redress, then they can take it to the courts. So normally internally they will be, and this I'm talking about progressive organizations that have put in place such policies, is first encouraging the reporting. I've had to sit down with people and say, why don't you put it down, the report exactly the way it's happened? So that then somebody can now stand, and you have to come out of the darkness. I know there's a part in the labor laws where it says the employer should also put in place mechanism where they can, let's say they can protect the complainant and probably not divulge the identity. So if you don't know who is complaining, then that complexes the whole matter. In the matters I've handled, whereby the offender insists, I need to know who complained. And you can't say it was reported, somebody said. You have to really be very clear that the person will come forward and make their complaint, and that they will feel still safe and protected to go through that whole process. So where that is done, of course, from HR is a very integral person within the process, but also the employer is alerted, and they come actually to be involved in the same to inquire what exactly happened. Was it purely an individual responsibility, or did the organization in one way or another overlook or sort of contribute towards whatever happened? So as an HR person, you have to escalate the matter to the head of the organization to be aware, but that also can damage the reputation of the organization. So once that is done, then there's a whole process of investigation. Now, this is one that one needs to be very careful, because in the process of investigation, a lot of intimidation is likely to happen. If there are any material evidence to be presented, they need to be presented. Some of them might actually be destroyed. So you want to immediately consider whether the offender is a risk in being within the organization during the investigation period, or we need to actually get them out of work for some time to step aside so that the whole process can happen. And once it has been established that the evidence, clear evidence that a violation has happened of that nature, you also need to relate it back to policy. According to our policy, this is what happens with somebody who has been found guilty of such an offense, and then now institute the disciplinary process. Now, as you know, the labor legislations in Kenya have become very pro-employee. So if you do not follow the detailed process of investigation, and then from there, once you confirm there's a case, move into another detailed process of disciplinary, you're likely to lose the case quickly, and the person can seek redress against the organization. So why am I saying this is to say, yes, there's a very good process of follow through, but one needs to be very equipped in going step by step, all the requirements that need to happen, because the court, when the matter lands in court, they rely a lot on the internal process of investigation that happened within the organization. The reports that were prepared, the evidence that was collected in order for them to determine if the person seeks to proceed. But as far as the organization is concerned, the process will end where the offender has been found culpable, and then the appropriate disciplinary action has been taken, whether it is dismissal, termination, or warning, whatever it is that has been done. Then subsequently is now protecting the person of the complainant. Are they safe to continue being in the same department, or do they need to be deployed into another department, or should we deploy the offender? So those decisions will be made based on the circumstances at hand.
Thank you, Mercy, for that. Thank you. So now my last question is, what is your call to action? How do we ensure 16 days of activism every day in ending violence at the workplace? happens? How do we ensure that safe spaces are consistently, workspaces are safe spaces, and there is a whole value system that's upheld in ensuring all employees are comfortable, all employees do not face any form of justice? What is that call to action?
Okay, I'll have a few points to that. First of all, at the workplace, it needs to be really have employee a multi-approach process, whereby you're talking about the employer, yeah, the employee representatives, if you're talking about the union, employees, key decision makers, the board, everybody needs to be brought, they need to come together to realize that these things happen. And for a consistent and a fair process of addressing the same needs to be put in place in every organization, so that where there is need for enforcement in terms of the adequacy of the policy, the ministry needs to step in and do so. And I know through a lot of lobbying and a lot of joint concerted efforts have made it that in the current Labor Employment Act, a lot of inputs have been included to protect and to highlight that actually there is sexual harassment at the workplace. And these are the necessary requirements that each employer needs to embrace in the workplace. So that needs to be captured in terms of engaging not just employees only, but their representatives, the employers, and other decision makers, investors into the business. Everybody needs to be. I know for international investors who come to operate in Kenya, they come with already certain preconditions. We will only invest in organizations that uphold the dignity, of all staff and assure fairness and equality of all employees. But even for local industries and enterprises, this needs to take place. There's need also to realize that in the workplace, there's need for clear ways of understanding how to report, how to detect that this is happening, because I can tell you a lot of such violations are not reported. They're either underreported or never reported. So just there's need to encourage people, staff to voice, and through this can happen through awareness, a lot of awareness. I've put programs where organizations have a whole session where new employees coming on board during induction, they have to be taken through to understand this organization is an equal opportunity organization. We do not allow any form of violence or any form of discrimination or harassment. That needs to be articulated at the right first day when you join work. And that needs to be signed off from the top office, that's the CEO's office, that this will not be condoned. So awareness, as most of the other speakers have said, backed up by policies that are adequate and that can be reviewed, can be audited, and can be enforced where there are gaps. One can be able to check that. The other aspect I want to say is that we need to still keep on lobbying. I don't know whether it's lobbying more, advocacy more with our decision makers. These labor laws are part of the laws that are made by our legislators, yes. And sometimes the intention is there, the evidence is there, what needs to be done, but political goodwill. Even for the courts, some of these labor matters go in here. We are waiting because we do not have such provisions even in the labor laws. I'll just look at our Employment Act, and it does not even define sexual harassment. It just says sexual harassment will take the following forms, will be described in the following forms. And it gives anywhere where you have been asked for favors, sexual favors, where probably your performance or your growth in terms of promotion is determined through other. So it's not really clear what exactly is it, so that people can say, when my manager calls me to work extra hours in the evening, and then decides to ask me to do certain things that are inappropriate, should I not? And will that be a form of disrespect or insubordination, or do I have a right to? So I think a lot of goodwill in terms of reinforcing what has already, the milestones we have achieved in terms of our legislation being more robust, being more inclusive and detailed to capture some of the things that ideally would not quickly pass as forms of GBV. Another call to action I would like to put it is that there's need to be some investments. You need to put some investments in the workplaces. Let me put it this way. Progressive organizations have actually had to put in a full-time paid counselor at the workplace. Yeah, somebody who staff can feel safe to go to, employees can confide in, and they have the necessary skills and experience to capture and report such matters and follow them through to the end. Yeah, not all HR people who normally, typically people would bring their grievances to, have the necessary skills to manage as counselors. Yeah, sometimes somebody is going through depression because of an issue at work. How do I handle depression at the workplace? Do I have the skills to manage that? So it's an investment because the employer might have to put in an extra resource that will address that, where people can feel safe. And I've seen in organizations where they feel they cannot have that person in-house, then they have to contract services outside where staff can go discreetly, incognito, to a counselor out of office and be able to explain what is going on to them. So yeah, a bit of investment needs to go into that, especially now with the COVID. A lot of debriefing, especially as people return to work when situations get better, will need to go through that. And therapy, where do they go to? Everybody will be looking back at recovering business-wise and the economies of the business, of the organization. But who will be doing the other social recovery of those that have been at home or those that have been highly impacted by COVID, who need to get back into the proper state of mind and health and emotion to be able to go back and perform as before. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcy, and for sharing that candid point-to-point action. And you've brought out a very great point. Being holistic, taking care of our mental health at the workplace and the repercussions of, during COVID time. We've also talked about raising awareness. There seems to be a really huge gap in awareness across all board, from women living with disabilities, Campus Me Too, and now at the workplace. You've also brought out the multi-sectoral approach process to it. Thank you so much. We're really honored to have you on board and share your expertise. We're really streaming. You are streaming on live on YouTube, so I'm sure other HRs and other professionals in the workplace have been able to tune in and look at all this information. So thank you very much, Marcy. I'd like now to invite Grace Gitao. Grace Gitao has been part of the documentary, and we saw her on the first phase of the documentary. I'd like her to share briefly her experience when it came to shooting the video and the emotions that came up, and how much we need to advocate for 16 days of activism every day across all our spaces.
Okay.
Karibu, Grace.
Thank you so much, Maryanne. Apologies, I won't be able to put on my video because my internet has been giving me a lot of problem, but I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can, Grace.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, I'll begin with the first question that you've asked about, like my experience on shooting this video. It brought a lot of emotions from me, because when it comes to matters of gender-based violence, they're close to my heart, because I have seen many survivors of gender-based violence go through a lot of mental torture. I've seen most of them most of the terrible effects that happen, and how it mainly affects our generations and many generations to come. It affects the lives of our mothers, the lives of our fathers, and also children that see some of these things happening and being perpetuated and still not having people to fight for them. So the emotions that came in were that we need to come up and speak out about these issues, because it is a very important and sensitive matter that most of the times it has been normalized per se. I'd like to say that because of our cultural background as Africans, and also in a lot of male dominance and a lot of patriarchy that has been happening over time. So I feel like we need to be bold more on speaking about gender-based violence, and it's not a matter of just the 16 days of gender activism. The 16 days of gender activism have now concluded today. Let's not stop this conversation from happening. Let's continue lobbying. Let's continue fighting for these survivors who are experiencing this vice on gender-based violence, and also more so on speaking about the Campus Me Too. The campaign that both Jael and Cesarine has talked about, the campaign focused on eliminating sexual harassment at universities and colleges, including the widely reported cases or practices of lecturers pressuring students to exchange sexual acts for good grades. I feel like we should now be at a point of empowering students to break the silence on sexual harassment and stand up for their rights, because you don't need to be a woman, you don't need to be a man, you don't need to be a student, you don't need to be a staff or a survivor. You need to care, because if you do not care, nobody will be out there to break the silence and speak about SGBV cases. You can be part of this change. You can write to us. I'll just like to emphasize more on the Campus Me Too campaign. You can write to us on all our social media platform, Campus Me Too. We are on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Join all our conversations there. We also have a lot of resources from our website, www.campusmetoo.com. A lot of resources, a lot of things that can help both the students, the lecturers, as well as the parents, to help the survivors, or to help students who've been suffering for a very long time on matters to do with sexual harassment. Get in touch with us now. We are building this community to hold these institutions accountable. And everyone, and I'm saying this again, everyone has something to offer, and we can all make a difference, because a campus safe for every student to learn is a better campus for all of us, including me, you, and the next generation. And this issue is not a matter of the 16 days of gender activism. It's a conversation that should be done every day, because every day somebody's wife, somebody's husband, somebody's child is undergoing sexual gender-based violence. But who is there to give them the courage to speak? Who is there to give them the mic and talk about these issues that are affecting them on a day-to-day life? So let's hold that mantle. Let's keep each other accountable on these issues on sexual gender-based violence, because they're really critical and touch in our daily lives and can be an instrument of change if we are all speaking out and having the courage and the conviction of solidarity to stand with these survivors and help them speak out and tell them that they are not alone, but to tell them that we care and will stand in the gap of helping them find the justice and the change we need. And we can all start at different levels, just being there for them, and also speaking out and saying no to some of these issues on sexual gender-based violence.
Thank you so much, Grace. Thank you for being part of this documentary and sharing your raw and very vivid experiences when it comes to the Campus Me Too campaign. Thank you for being so bold in talking about these issues and advocating for them across all spaces. I'd like to let you go. I know you have a meeting right now. So thank you so much. We'll just screen the last part of the documentary, but you'll be able to catch up with you later. So all the best and thank you so much.
Okay, thank you as well, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. So the last part of the documentary is ready, and Victor, are you ready to screen? Victor? Winnie, are you there?
We can't hear unless it's just me.
Let's give the tech team a few minutes for them to prepare the video so that they can screen it.
My name is Wanja Maina. I'm a young person. I'm 29 years old. I'm a young person with a disability. I am a gender and development specialist, and I'm currently the coordinator of COVID and Disability Caucus here in Kenya. I would describe myself as an extrovert, happy-go-lucky. I also happen to be a blogger behind the popular blog called Hummingbird. "16 Days of Activism," as we all know, started on the 25th of November, and then we're going to finish the 16 days on 10th December, which is the International Human Rights Day. I think it's a very important day in the calendar of human rights. This is because the whole world has appreciated the fact that young women and girls across the world, all of them have commonalities. For example, all of them have a gender-based violence story, a story of violation, a story of violence against them. So these 16 days give us a special opportunity to look at the challenges they go through, to actually normalize breaking the silence. But as I have always said before, that every day should be a day against gender-based violence. But obviously, I appreciate that the 16 days are meant to amplify and to remind the world that when you go to some small village in Kenya, you still find girls who are not able to enjoy their human rights. Having a disability, people with disabilities are not homogeneous. They are very diverse. So depending on where they live, if they live in the rural areas or in the urban areas, then the day differs. But for my day, I would say that my day starts at around 5:30 in the morning, where I wake up. After waking up, depending on my schedule, I start by walking around the estate to keep fit. I also go to the gym in the morning, after which I come back to the house at around 9:30. When I come back to the house at around 9:30, that's when I respond to the emails or do the activities of the day. I like to maintain a healthy lifestyle as well as the lifestyle of being productive. So I try as much as possible not to work past 5 p.m. This is because I realize, and many other young people like me realize and appreciate, that there has been a lot of issues of pressures and stress around mental health. So at this time, I'm trying very much to balance healthy living and working. But sometimes it differs if I have a meeting or if there's an activity that I am doing. COVID-19 has affected adversely the lives of women and girls with disabilities. As you know, COVID-19 was in nobody's calendar. It was just an emergency. It was a pandemic. So obviously all the challenges that come with a pandemic is confusion, anxiety, there's no end in sight. But specifically young women and girls with disabilities, the first thing really has been challenged in terms of movement. And when I say movement, really is not moving from point A to point B, but also challenge in terms of, running away from violence. And the police are telling us every day that women and girls are across Kenya, the cases of GBV are on the rise during COVID-19. So there is increase of GBV amongst people with disabilities, young women and girls. Sad to note that some of the people who died during COVID are people with disability. Issues around loss of economic income. People with disabilities are always the last to be hired and the first to be fired. So a lot of people have lost their jobs and their source of livelihood. Some of the people with disabilities also have underlying conditions. So when there was this whole confusion, even those with other conditions other than COVID-19 also could not access health facilities. Parents with children who need a lot of rehabilitation could not attend those facilities. So COVID-19 has confirmed what we already know. And what we already know is that people with disabilities always come last during disaster response. It has confirmed that people with disabilities are never factored in when it comes to giving of resources, giving of maybe dignity packs. Importantly to note that even the dissemination of the COVID information, it was through our caucus that we were able to actually get the minister to use sign language when he was doing the COVID updates. So the effects have been adverse. There's no end in sight, so we are just trying to advocate and hope that moving forward things will be better. The forms of gender-based violence experienced by women and girls with disabilities are many depending on where they come from. Sad to note that some of the perpetrators are actually family members, relatives, and neighbors. This is because when you have a disability, it's like you are burdensome to everybody in families. Of course, the first violence that probably nobody talks about is really rejection, where you've had snide comments. This child in our family, we don't get such children. Considering that we come from a traditional African society that has a lot of negative perceptions and associations of disability, for example, it is that I won't mention, they say you are cursed, or you are not a child of this family, or we wronged the Lord. and a lot of explanations. So when there's rejection and lack of appreciation of diversity of children, it means that these children don't get an opportunity to go to school, because I believe lack of being taken to school is a form of gender-based violence. Because the moment you don't educate a girl, you are taking away from them the ability, to engage, face other girls without disabilities, and all the other forms of gender-based violence also face those with disabilities. But now the question is really the extent. Physical violence, sexual violence, which is actually on the high. A lot of defilements have been reported, even in our media, as you might have noted, economic violence, and many other examples, including economic violence, where you are not able to get a job and you are not able to work and you are easily fired. It takes away people's dignity and ability to live a good life. So those are some of the challenges that are faced by women and girls. You know, gender-based violence, people have always assumed is where you have a black eye in the face, of which it's part of gender-based violence. But it's everywhere. In the cyberspaces, as I said, I'm a blogger. Every so often when I write about some topical issues or some issues that elicit high emotions, instead of people disagreeing or agreeing with me based on what I've written, they must insert disability as if to say, you cannot talk like that on the internet. So maybe first, as a big consumer of the internet, it's like people want you to get out of the internet. Economic violence, of course, instances where you are not able to get a job or you are underpaid, so familiar. Gender-based violence, as you know, it's always marred by a lot of silence. But the physical violence, nothing to report about. I'm a youth leader. My peers and friends that I hang around with have very common of such stories. So while I might not have experienced that directly, I have peers. Indirectly, I have, because I've had situations where I have to link them to facilities that offer aftercare. And essentially, the disability community is very communal, because you get each other from a level. Everyone is like, it also happened to me. So I might not have a lot of instances to give as an individual, but indirectly, the stories are common. Justice for survivors of GBV. Outside, the lawyers usually say justice delayed is justice denied. There is just a big confusion from the very beginning. The process of justice, it really starts from the first interaction of justice, which, for example, if it's an issue of sexual violence, is an issue of reporting, getting the medical aspect catered for, but also now access to justice. You agree with me, starts with the authorities. And by authorities, I would say I mean the police. Now, when it comes to the side of the health, I would say is that the health does not understand people with disabilities around communication for deaf people, for instance. But when you go to the issue of justice in terms of government, I'll start with the government number of justice of gender-based violence, which is 1195. Now, some of the young leaders that are young people with disabilities that I lead who are deaf have always asked, so this number is meant for calling and I am deaf, so why can't we activate this number to also appreciate SMSs, for instance? A big gap. Moving from there is that parents and caregivers of girls and women with disabilities are also a big barrier. We'd assume that they'd automatically have their best interest at heart, but sometimes we follow some stories only for them to say it was solved, or they just go silent. So some of those pitfalls where matters as grim as defilement, for instance, are just solved locally out of the police station. And even more matters that we don't know about are hidden in silence in families, only spoken about in whispers. So I would say that the police really need a lot of sensitization, because it's from them that we access the referral pathways. But even more importantly, how aware are our women and girls with disabilities of their rights? Because in Kenya, we've talked about, I know my rights, I know my health rights. What happens is that there are people who are so disenfranchised in this country that they don't even know that they have rights. But most importantly, implementations of the acts and the laws, because the issue of justice really is about fairness and ensuring that however small or however big you are, you get your rights. So big challenges everywhere, but we are still pushing. My first call to action is that we need to break the silence. To break the silence, because even before you go to the stakeholders like the chiefs and the NGO people, the issue of sexual gender-based violence are first known at family level and at community level. It's still these very people that solve the issues locally. 100,000 is passed from one hand to another. So my first call to action is that we need to break the silence. We don't need, in fact, I've always asked, if there's a young woman who has been raped, how come is the one who carries the shame and not the one who raped her? Because she's a victim. In fact, it's like when a vehicle finds you on the road, sorry to compare gender-based violence and a vehicle, and then me, I'm hit by the vehicle, I break my leg, but I should be ashamed. I think the one who should be ashamed is the one who hit me with the vehicle. So some of the challenges is really the shame that is associated. And the problem with the silence and the shame, people don't come out. So 16 days of violence, and I actually appreciated even to see someone as senior as the UK ambassador to Kenya talking about her gender-based violence story. Because the first thing, my call to action is break the silence. We don't need to protect these people because they are bad people too. It's just like remove all barriers when it comes to access to justice in the justice referral pathway. We are talking about the attitude of those policemen. We are talking about the accessibility of courts. We are talking about accessibility of information. So my first recommendation to stakeholders, because I believe the community is a big stakeholder, my first recommendation is that we should never normalize sexual violence. It is not normal, it is not funny, so we can never normalize gender-based violence. It's not normal, it's not part of our way of life. The government should appreciate that all of us are citizens, all of us, not some of us. In any case, the preamble of the Constitution, I believe they say something like "with the people." Now, with the people means everybody inside that. It should bother government officials, and it should bother people who hold budgets and duty bearers. There are still huge cases of girls and young women with disabilities undergoing gender-based violence. My fourth call to action is dissemination of information. A lack of information. Information is power. When people are empowered with information, they know that this is their first point of contact after an abuse. They know where to go for the PrEPs and the pregnancy screening or the HIV screening or PrEPs, depending on the nature of the sexual violation. They know which police station to go to. I've been seeing a lot of efforts to have gender offices in police stations. But I would also say that considering that people with disabilities are also the largest minority, maybe we should also have gender disability desks in police stations, where we have police who speak sign language, for instance, who understand. And also something else is just make the process of justice simpler. If a person has gone to police station A to detail their experiences and how the matter happened, the unfortunate thing in this country is that they'll also go to another desk and also explain the same thing, and then another desk and explain, which is also traumatizing, it's fatiguing. So even collection of information, collection of samples, collection of issues from the people who have suffered or undergone violence should be made so simple, such that if I've been perpetrated, if I explain to Officer A, I don't have to explain it to B, to C, to D. But my most important thing in my call to action is that Kenyans, Africans really should just appreciate diversity, and they should know that people with disabilities are part of society. And when we just normalize that these people are here to stay, we shall be very sensitive to their needs. I want to believe that your average girl with a disability somewhere in Mombasa, all they want is to go to school, eat nice meals, pray with their friends, go to sleep, watch a movie, eat mabuyu with their cousins. But it cannot be normal that we take away their rights, their joy, such that these children are forced to even grow before their age because they are undergoing a lot of violence. So for my 16 days of activism message, I would say we break the silence, we appreciate and respect girls and women with disabilities, starting from the family level to the community level, to the county level, and then to the national level. And I repeat, we cannot normalize gender-based violence.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It was quite an engaging account of how women with disabilities face gender-based violence. I'd like to ask if there's any member of the audience who has a question and that they would like to express and ask. This is the time for that. Just to let you know that this is just a brief preview of what we're doing in ensuring that there are 16 days of activism every day. We're going to roll over into a full-time campaign, and we'll hope to invite you for the official launch when we watch this documentary in a full theater. So I'd like to ask if there's anyone, any member of the audience who has a question that needs to be answered. Okay, if not, I'd like to thank everybody who's been here today. I'd like to, my special thanks to Peris, to Mercy Ndoku, to Jael, to Cesarine. My special thanks to Grace Gitao, who's the campus Me Too team lead. I'd like to thank everyone who's been able to join into this call. We hope to engage you on social media further and to ensure that it's 16 days of activism every day across all board. As I've said, we hope that this documentary, we're in the process of launching, becomes an official campaign for us here as Youth Agenda. And during this period, it's very important that we have key actors come on board and support this and mainstream of these issues across workplaces, across higher institutions of learning, across the informal settlements, across CBOs, CSOs. I'd like to ask if Kea, our CEO, has anything to say before we adjourn. You are on it.
Thank you very much, Maryanne. Indeed, I've been listening through the sessions. Very good. I personally learned and will be improving on certain areas and also pushing, especially you, Maryanne, to ensure that some of the things that have been discussed in this meeting be taken through for action. I want to appreciate all our panelists and the speakers and the players who have participated in this very, very important webinar, which we are going to work on, edit and remove the challenges that we face today and publish it properly. Bear with us. Our communications team is going to pull this video down, edit it, and reshare the best bit of it for viewership to the public. Please don't share it to your partners before we submit to you the right video clip for you to share internally and widely to the public. Otherwise, I continue to join the partners and the players in continuing to discuss these matters of gender-based violence beyond the 16 days of activism, and to try and practice, put the aspects of HR that have been pointed out by Masinduku to practice, to try and look at how to put in measures to ensure that sexual gender-based violence is actually addressed. And just my advice also going forward, and even to the campaigns that are running in the universities, that let's look at these matters also from a male perspective. I mean, I watched videos of people in universities abroad, of young men really facing challenges at the universities of their graduation because they refuse to play ball on certain conditions that were put to them. So, and just looking at it even in matters peace and people accessing justice in their areas of work, people accessing justice in their areas of interest. Even consultancies today sometimes not easy to get because you're not playing to certain conditions or the games that have been set in society. So I think it's been a good discussion, and I want to thank all of us for being part of it and for following through and for ensuring that it became a success. I wish you a great day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to now officially adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much for joining in and having a fruitful discussion on how we can make 16 days of activism a consistent and constant daily thing in ensuring that their safe spaces are upheld within our household, our workplaces, our institutions of higher learning. We'd like to encourage us to follow our social media pages, to have a full glimpse of the work that you're doing as Youth Agenda in the inclusion and fighting for gender equality. We hope that we will join each of you, and even humanity and inclusion, the campus need to, in ensuring that spaces are gender friendly and bias, and there's zero violence and there's zero tolerance for violence. Thank you very much, and this meeting has been officially adjourned. Thank you, and goodbye. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Maryanne. Have a nice day too.
Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. It was great sharing the platform with you. Have a nice day.
Asante.
Thank you, Maryanne. That was excellent and well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.